This is Kristalina Georgieva. She is the IMF Managing Director. She is the head of the International Monetary Fund. If you are not aware, the International Monetary Fund is an organization of 189 countries. They work to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and to reduce poverty around the world. Their primary purpose is to ensure the stability of the international monetary system, the system of exchange rates and international payments that enable countries to transact with each other, countries and their citizens. The fund's mandate was updated in 2012 to include all macroeconomic and financial sector issues that bear on global stability. Also, the International Monetary Fund, they are the holders of the SDRs, special drawing rights, the holders and the issuers. The special drawing rights, if you are not aware, and many of you may not be, are a pooled group of international fiat currencies that are pooled into a centralized reserve asset created by the IMF in 1969 to supplement its member countries' official fiat reserves. And the IMF also has quite a bit of gold, so take that for what you want to take it as. Now, what's been interesting that I've seen over this pandemic, and the saying goes, never let a good crisis go to waste, is that when one institution on a global scale puts out a document, the rhetoric seems to go down the line with multiple institutions. This is the International Monetary Fund. We see a similar document that came out today from the World Bank. And here's what I want to get into, though, okay? She is directly calling out rebuilding the economy, aka the Great Reset that we've seen from the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, the IMF, multiple of these large financial global institutions talking about this Great Reset. And they are resetting the entire economy and they are going digital. And in my opinion, and just speculation on my part, I do believe that it has quite a bit to do with blockchain and digital assets. I want to play this short bit for you here. This is from today. This is a world turned upside down.
To confront this crisis, we can take inspiration from a previous generation. William Beveridge, a former LSE director, issued his famous report in 1942, which led to the creation of the UK's National Health Service. And in 1944, John Maynard Keynes and Harry Dexter White led the establishment of the Bretton Woods system, including the IMF, my institution, and the World Bank. They forged a better world in the worst possible moment, in the midst of a war. We need the same spirit now for the post-pandemic world, to build one that is more inclusive and more resilient.
All right, I want to read that again to you because I don't want any translation issues. To confront this crisis, we can take inspiration from a previous generation. And in 1944, this is directly from this, John Maynard Keynes and Harry Dexter White led the establishment of the Bretton Woods system, including the IMF and the World Bank. If you are not aware what the Bretton Woods system is, this is Keynes, was able to make his proposal. This is Bretton Woods Conference, the official British proposal at the Bretton Woods Conference, but it was not accepted. This initial proposal by John Maynard Keynes was Bancor. Bancor is a supranational currency, global currency. What ended up happening is, rather than a supranational currency, the conference adopted a system of pegged exchange rates, ultimately tied to physical gold, and a system managed by the World Bank and the IMF. In practice, the system implicitly established the United States as a reserve currency convertible to gold at a fixed price, on demand by other governments. The dollar was implicitly established as a reserve by the large trade surplus and gold reserves held by the U.S. at the time of the conference. Now, we all know that the United States dollar is not attached to gold, has not been since the early 70s with Nixon. But it's very interesting to me that the head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is taking inspiration and directly calling out John Maynard Keynes and Harry Dexter, who led to the establishment of the gold standard, talking about forging a better world in the worst possible moment. And you all know me, or some of you that know me on different social media platforms know that I don't believe that certain digital assets are going to be tied to gold, at least from a national level. But I just see the rhetoric, and I think that it's increasingly interesting here. So now they're also talking about, she's talking about digital transformation as well. They talk about green finance all the time. And we know where the International Monetary Fund, where their loyalties lie. It's about finance, right? I mean, it's right in the name. So now, interestingly enough as well, this is an NBER working paper series, Monetary Policy Cooperation / Coordination and Global Financial Crisis in Historical Perspective. This is just this month, October 2020. This is Eichengreen. I forget his first name. We'll see it in a second here. Finally, Eichengreen proposes that we revisit J.M. Keynes' idea that the IMF become a global central bank that issues Bancor, a global currency. Whether any of these proposals will ever be adopted is an interesting question. This gentleman right here, Eichengreen, he's a columnist for the IMF. More interesting, we see Barry Eichengreen right here. Digital assets in a post-pandemic world. This same gentleman just so happened to have been interviewed by David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple. Ripple is a major blockchain company that has ties in with many of the legacy banks. So we have the same guy that is a columnist for the IMF putting out a paper in 2020 proposing that we revisit the idea of Bancor, which is essentially a global currency. And we have Kristalina Georgieva of the IMF talking directly about that same gentleman, J.M. Keynes. Is it J.M.? Hang on, sorry. I'll lose it here. John Maynard Keynes, yeah, J.M. Keynes, talking about the same gentleman, leading to the establishment of Bretton Woods, which was fiat being tied to the gold standard. All right, so I don't know. I mean, you all know my opinion on that. But it's right there in front of our faces. Most of us are too worried watching the news. But what's going on behind the scenes is they are definitely not letting this crisis go to waste. And it's just very interesting that the IMF columnist has an interview with a major blockchain company, that being Ripple, and the head of the IMF directly calling out John Maynard Keynes for forging a better world post-pandemic here. It's just complete insanity. We look down into it. They completely stopped what was going to happen during this pandemic by pumping more and more fiat and printing more and more fiat into the markets. They provided, governments around the world provided $12 trillion in fiscal support. The United States is already, $28 trillion in debt. So essentially, she is telling you to praise what they did while you're drowning underwater right now, because our purchasing power, make no mistake about it, this is going to get bad. Our purchasing power has gone down and debt has gone up from a governmental standpoint across the board. So I'm curious where this goes. All right, so I talked about it a little bit earlier. On the day before the IMF puts that out, David Malpass from the World Bank, I don't think I really need to explain the World Bank, it's the World Bank. Reversing the Inequality Pandemic, speech by World Bank Group President David Malpass. And this talks directly about digital transformation as well, digital development, digital infrastructure. They're all moving towards blockchain. You're going to see it more here as well. This is economic dominance, financial technology, and the future of U.S. economic coercion. This is through CNAS. If you're not aware what CNAS is the Center for a New American Security. It is a Washington, D.C. based think tank established in 2007. It specializes in the United States national security issues. Just so happens to be that Barry Eichengreen is directly called out in this as well. Now let's pay attention to what this says here. Moreover, although transitioning cross-border payment systems is a substantially more challenging task than modernizing domestic payment infrastructures, emerging financial technologies such as blockchain-based clearing mechanisms could potentially play a key role in simplifying one of the most challenging parts of developing a cross-border payment network: converting between currencies. As economist Barry Eichengreen has argued, the same dude that was called out for the Bancor currency, the same dude that was interviewed by the large blockchain company Ripple, as economist, economist Barry Eichengreen has argued, financial technologies will probably reduce the contemporary barriers to a world where there are multiple international currencies rather than one dominant one. Which one dominant one do you think he's talking about right now? He is very much so talking about the US dollar, and could enable a return to the type of multi-currency world that existed prior to the 20th century. The dollar could remain the largest currency block in such a multi-currency world, but alternatives could nonetheless reach a scale sufficient to enable targets of US sanctions, such as Iran or North Korea, to continue economically significant quantities of trade with Asian countries while avoiding financial institutions that touch the US financial system. They're talking about bridging currencies. It's right there in front of our faces, everybody. I mean, you may think I'm crazy for saying this. I'm not all about attaching a digital asset to the gold standard. I'm not all about a supranational currency, aka Bancor. But when you have the leader of the IMF directly calling out the gentleman who pretty much led to the development of the gold standard, but initially wanted to develop Bancor, and you have an IMF columnist talking about Bancor in an October 2020 document who was interviewed by Ripple 2 months previous. I just don't know where this goes. It's extreme. I'll tell you one thing, it's extremely interesting. But take everything with a grain of salt. This is all speculation here, but we do know what's happening from a debt standpoint. We do know what's happening with technology and blockchain. So for me, that is not speculation. It's more or less how this shakes out at this point. We can see here the Bank of Canada, security and convenience of a central bank digital currency. This is yesterday. Every bank is going digital. Every central bank will have a digital currency at some point in the near future. Now, this is today as well. The European Central Bank will explore whether and how TIPS could support cross-currency instant payments. The investigation is done jointly with Riksbank. The tests look into how to transfer funds from the euro to the Swedish kronor and vice versa in the blink of an eye. Direct release from the European Central Bank. Direct release from Riksbank. And what we can see here, Riksbank has been in development of this e-krona for quite a while now. I think it's probably about a year or so. But interestingly enough, they did use Accenture as their technology provider for e-krona. So I'm curious how they currency switch from euro to Swedish kronor and vice versa in the blink of an eye. All right, everybody. I think that's enough. I think the IMF news is enough. And like I said, pay attention to what these big institutions are doing. Don't pay attention. Obviously, if you want to watch the news, watch the news. But the saying, never let a good crisis go to waste, definitely applies with what's going on from a digitization standpoint. We see it across the board. Every banking institution, every financial institution, every government, across the board, they are all digitizing. And if they're not digitizing and integrating with blockchain and digital assets, then you better damn well believe that they're future-proofing to prepare for it when it does happen. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Have a great evening.